I love to tell the story of unseen things above, of Jesus and His glory, of Jesus and His love. I love to tell the story, because I know 'tis true. It satisfies my longings as nothing else can do. I love to tell the story, 'twill be my theme in glory, to tell the old story of Jesus and His love.
It is very likely that in our congregation there are several people right now who have given up the will to live, that is, they no longer have a desire to live. And speaking statistically, it is very likely that within the next 12 months, at least one and probably two people in our congregation will attempt to take their own lives. So the topic of the day is a significant topic, and it does apply to all of us because there are people close to us who are dealing with this issue of the will to live. So we're going to look at that this morning. A few questions for you. First of all, with a teenager. Why in the world would a teenager lose the will to live? It's possible that some one of you may have struggled with that a little bit in your teenage years, but most teenagers don't, but some do. And for those of us who just had a wonderful time in our teen years and never had a thought like that, we cannot even imagine why a teenager might think that way. But why would they? We need to think about it because some teens do, and not only to think about it, but lose that will to live and go a step farther.
Tired of being bullied.
Tired of being bullied.
Gerald, isn't like the third leading cause of death in teens?
For teens, yes, very high. It is a significant factor. So why is it happening? I mean, what's going on in the mind of a teen? Harry suggested bullying is one reason. We know that some teens have ended their lives because they have been bullied. What other things might cause a teenager to lose the will to live and go on?
Girlfriend, boyfriend situation.
Boyfriend, girlfriend, yes. Having anything else you can think of as to
Can't
what?
see a solution to their problem,
Okay.
and they can't look to the future.
Not being able to see ahead. And I guess that's one of the frustrations we as adults, older adults, where we've been around a while, we know some facts of life that the teen doesn't recognize. The teen's vision is pretty short, very nearsighted in general, not able to see very far ahead. And as a result, when these issues come up and the frustrations of life that we all experience come up, they just can't see a way out. They can't see beyond that. They can't see that problem as a temporary problem, as a problem that's going to go away. This little issue of love that we have at the moment, and the crisis in our love life at the moment, is going to go away. There'll be another one down the road, but that one will go away. And they can't see it. And as a result, they start to take some actions that are harmful.
Also, not as many kids are in church now as the other.
That makes a difference. So all the factors are still there operating on them as they were on us, but still the home life is different. The spiritual life is different. You have more and more kids who are not a part of a good home life, more and more kids who are not a part of a church life, and as a result, they respond differently to the same issues that everybody experiences.
When we were teenagers, most mothers were homing, and nowadays, during the work period, there's nobody at home, and they don't get taught.
So, and that's a big issue, isn't it? Not having somebody there who can help them deal with the issues of their life. What about the people in nursing homes? We all know people in nursing homes, and if you don't, you will. What about them and losing? Why do they lose the will to live? Because if you go into a nursing home, and you've all been in there, if you're not, you will. In going in, you see a lot of people who are just waiting to die. It's a warehouse for the dying. I mean, it's a place where people go to die. And that's how the people inside kind of see it too. But why are so many of them in that state? Why do so many of those people want to die? They've lost this will to live.
No longer productive or able to be productive.
No longer able to be productive. Don't think that they can do anything significant.
Feel like nobody cares.
Like nobody cares, and sometimes they don't.
The children or friends either dead or they don't ever come to see them anymore. They're lonely.
They are lonely.
Or children live away.
You can have situations where the family is spread all over the country. And so the parent who's in the nursing home doesn't really want to leave that area and doesn't want to go somewhere else to be near other people. So I mean, it's a problem. I think you're right about some of the reasons why. Not being able to be productive, not seeing any meaning to their life anymore, not able to do anything. Let me rephrase it in general terms, not seeing any way that God could use them there. I mean, even if you take a person who is a believer, have been a believer all their lives, they've gone into the nursing home, sometimes you'll find these people still in this same situation. I want to die. I want to go. Jesus, take me now. I don't need to be here anymore. And one of the reasons that I've found in talking to a number of people is that they don't see that God can use them there. Yes, when I was still teaching Sunday school to sixth graders, when I was still doing this, I was doing volunteer work for the church and doing these things. God was using me and I felt productive and useful. But now I'm in this nursing home and I no longer see that God can use me here. It's bad thinking, but that's what they're thinking. Can God use a person in a prison? It does all the time, doesn't he? Can God use a person in a hospital? Whether it's a prison, a hospital, a nursing home, God can use a person anywhere, can't he? The difference for the older person versus the teenager in that situation, a teenager may have that same kind of feeling about in this school, in this relationship, in this whatever, God can't use me here, and so therefore I'm giving up. One of the reasons it's easier for a younger person, whether the younger person is 50 or 40 or 30 or 20 or 10, is that the younger person can often see more options, more alternatives. They have other things that can sometimes just distract them from the question, in other situations to actually give them something else to do, to take their minds off that one thing and make them more productive in another situation. How do people respond when they are faced with imminent death? You're told that you have 30 days to live.
Tie up all loose ends and affairs in order.
Get their affairs in order.
The first thing they do is, why me? What have I done wrong? Pity me, I'm going.
There are the general 5 steps. It's denial first, then anger, and then bargaining. God, if you'll just give me 30 more days, then I'll do this for you. And then it's depression. And then finally acceptance. So it's generally, and the steps can be interchanged, they can be put together, but people who are faced with imminent death normally go through the 5 steps. And we do it differently, depending upon what we believe, but normally you still go through the 5. So when they're faced with it, what kind of action do you get? Some may be very logical and recognizing that it was coming, and so they're getting organized and they're getting the affairs in order and preparing for their death. Not everybody does that. What else do they do? Many times they don't get past the anger stage, the bitterness and all that. Just get into that, and that's where they stay. They don't quite get to the next step. Some will run away from it. Some will try to, I'll take this into my own hands, right? I'm not going to wait around for this whatever to eat me. I'm going to go ahead and end my life right now. There are all kinds of ways to take your own life. And some can be very premeditated and gradual, and some can be premeditated and instantaneous through various means. What about when unbearable challenges? We're all going to face death at some point in time. We all face that. Now, for the typical teenager, that death, imminent death is not the issue. For a young person, imminent death is not the issue. It's something else. But when these unbearable challenges come in our lives, and unbearable in quotes, because they're unbearable because we've decided that they're unbearable, right? Isn't that true? When you've had a heavy challenge in your life, Something very difficult, one of the most difficult trials that a person could possibly imagine in your life. If we're talking about it now, you probably did bear it, didn't you? But at the time, it probably seemed unbearable. I'm not sure that I can carry this one any farther. So when we're feeling that way, when we feel that we have this unbearable challenge or trial or problem, what do?
I yell, help.
That's a very wise thing to do. Does everybody do that? No. Many people will not yell help. If they feel that they have this unbearable challenge, you may be very close to them and never know it. You may never know that they feel that they have an unbearable challenge. They will keep it from you. Some people just don't yell help. What do?
Avoid it.
Avoid it. Try to get away from it as best they can. Run away from it if they can. Sometimes if there's just a huge development in their lives, they'll just leave.
Sometimes they strike out at other people.
Sometimes that's right. You get aggressive toward maybe some people who are involved, or maybe people who aren't even involved. What's the argument for allowing euthanasia? I'm not asking anybody to support euthanasia, so don't get me wrong here. But there are people who do support euthanasia. Quality of life. All right, so these are people, all right, euthanasia in general means if there is no hope for someone. That's an interesting phrase that they use in the definition of euthanasia, no hope. If a person feels that they have an unbearable challenge, do they think there's hope? There are people who will argue that if there is no hope for a person to get better, then we should assist them in ending their lives. We were discussing before class started about the man who designed one of our national health care program in development that says that if you reach age 75, you should go. We don't need anybody around here over the age of 75. So, well, he's getting close, so it's going to be interesting to see how he deals with that.
He has an exemption.
Probably so. One more exemption. And in other countries, it's legal for a doctor to assist someone in their death. And there are people who want that in this country, and particularly on the West Coast, Oregon and Washington, they have some form of that already. But what's the argument? Well, the quality of life isn't there, so you should be allowed. It's merciful. Yes, to show mercy to somebody who's suffering and having no hope.
You're drained on assets.
Now, see, that's the manual's argument, is it's a drain on resources. I mean, these resources used to keep these people alive could be better spent over here. What about the person who gives their life for another? The soldier who falls on a hand grenade to protect the people around him.
Greater love have no man than this.
That he lay down his life for his friends. Here is an instance of someone sacrificing their life for someone else, and that's an honorable thing. When someone decides to take their life so that they can escape a burden, or so that they can escape dying in a certain way, are they doing that for someone else? In some cases, they may think that they're doing them a favor, but for the other people who are involved, that is exactly the wrong answer, because it is then a great burden on the people who are left behind. They're really doing it for themselves, aren't they? To avoid having to deal with a burden, to avoid having to deal with so many more months or weeks or whatever of this suffering, whatever it might be. So it is, I'm going to make it easier for myself, causing, in most cases, great pain for a lot of folks. Because in most of those situations of people who have taken their own lives or planned to take their own lives, the people close to them had little to no idea that it was going on. In most cases, no idea. And so then you're left with a questioning, what is it that I should have seen? What is it that I could have done? And so the people left behind are left with that problem for a long time. So they haven't helped them. They've really created a problem and a great hurt for them. A lot of guilt. So what can we do when we see someone who is losing their will to live? The problem is we don't see it often enough. But on occasion, you can see it. For example, if you're in a nursing home and someone's saying, I don't want to live anymore, well, they're telling you they don't want to live anymore. But there are times where we do recognize this problem in a person's life. What do you do? What can you do?
You listen to what they have to say, and you give them a positive reason to go on.
Very good. The best thing that you can do is listen to what's going on. We'll see that in the lesson this morning, is listen to what's going on. And then you go from there as to what you can do. But you give them encouragement for how, in fact, God can use them in the situation that they're in. Even in a nursing home, even in a prison, even in a hospital, even in wherever that person may be. They can be used. If you can recognize and point out to them something that they have done that has been a blessing to somebody else in that environment that they haven't even recognized. Because that's true for all of us. No matter who we are, where we are, what we're doing, there are people who are watching you. There are people who are watching you and what you do. And you have an impact on their lives. You may never know it. You may go to your grave without knowing the impact that you've had on another person's life because they watched you go through a situation. And it doesn't matter where it is. It can be at work. It can be at home. It can be in the grocery store. It can be in a parking lot. It can be in an automobile accident. It can be in a nursing home. It can be in a hospital. It can be anywhere. The movie clip I want to show you this morning from Dallas Buyers Club. I won't ask you how many have seen it. It's not one I'm going to recommend to you. It's a 2013 movie. It is rated R for a good reason. Language is very rough, but you would expect the language to be rough in this environment. And there are some sexual situations as well. So there's a lot going on here, so I'm not going to recommend the movie. The story is about Ron Woodruff. It's based on a true story. Ron Woodruff was an electrician and rodeo cowboy, a bull rider for fun, but electrician was his profession. The first scene you're going to see is he wakes up in an emergency room after an accident at work as an electrician, and he's going to get some news. Actually, he's going to find out that he has HIV. Now, Ron Woodruff is a hard-riding rodeo cowboy. He is not homosexual. He does not do intravenous drugs. However, he has had unprotected sex with a prostitute who used intravenous drugs, and he got the HIV virus from her. So in the movie, you see a lot of people who are in homosexual relationships because this is back in the 80s. I don't know about you, but I can remember a situation in the early 80s where at work we were a health insurance organization. And so we had an entire floor devoted to claims processors who paid health insurance claims. And the brother of one of our claims processors got AIDS. This was probably 84, something like that. This movie, Ron Woodward's situation, was 1985, is when he gets the hospital scene. What do we know about AIDS at that time? Not very much. What did we do to treat AIDS at that time? Not very much. They had AZT as a test drug at that point, and they did fast track it to get it available to people, but they misdosed it, and so they messed it up a lot in the early stages. But anyway, back to the story on the floor. The people, everybody was afraid of it, right? I mean, everybody was concerned about being around anybody who had AIDS. The people on that floor, all those claims processors, got together and went to management and said, we don't want her here anymore. Her brother has AIDS. We don't want to use the restroom that she uses. See, we didn't know how this was really transmitted. We had ideas, and we had some pretty good ideas, but the rumors around it were enormous. People were scared. That's the situation we're dealing with here.
We saw something which concerned us on your initial blood work, so we ran some additional tests.
See blood.
You've tested positive for HIV. which is the virus that causes AIDS. Your T cell count is down to 9. A healthy person has between 500 and 1,500. So frankly, we're surprised you're even alive.
Must it?
I know this can be a very scary thing. I know you're probably feeling overwhelmed right now. But what we would like to do is to impress upon you the gravity of your situation. Based on your health, based on your condition, based on all the evidence we have, we estimate you have 30 days left to put your affairs in order.
Can you get me ACT? Oh, I want to buy some. Now.
That isn't how it works. For about a year, a group of patients gets either the drug or placebo. It's totally left up to chance. Not even doctors are allowed to know.
So you can die in people's sugar? Here. How about this stuff overseas, huh? Germany, they got this dextran sulfate, all right? And they got this DDC, and they got AL721 over in Israel. How can I get some of this?
None of those drugs have been approved by the... There is a support group that meets daily in Andrade Auditorium. I suggest you try it out. Maybe go talk about your feelings, your concerns.
I'm dying.
He formed the Dallas Buyers Club, and what he did was he went down into Mexico and brought drugs up that were not illegal drugs, but they were not approved by the FDA, which the FDA then, once they found they were coming up, made them illegal. Nonetheless, he was bringing the drugs up and distributing them to people through a buyer's club. They paid $400 a month, and they got all the medicine that they needed for their $400 a month. So it was a club. That's what he did. And so many people in the community who had HIV and full-blown AIDS were getting treatments not approved by the FDA, but they were getting treatments rather than just getting killed with AZT through an overdose in the early trials.
I just want a ice cold beer, bull ride again. Well, take my woman dancing, you know. I want kids. Sometimes I just feel like I'm fighting for life. I just ain't got time to live. I want it to mean something.
So why do you think he had such a strong desire to live, a will to live?
He has not accomplished everything he wanted.
Okay. In fact, that's the way many people react, right, to imminent death is, wait a minute, there's so much more that I want to do. For example, I want to have kids. What else? I like the word meaning. He wanted it to mean something. And that's what everybody wants, whether you're facing death or not. We want meaningful life. We want a life that has some meaning. One of the things that you see in the movie, if you do manage to watch the whole thing, is that there is this will to live, this desire to live on the part of all these people, they're not giving up, not wanting to die, and they fight to get medicine to help them live a longer life. That's what they're after, is to live longer. And as Ron said, to do something meaningful. Before moving on to our story, I do want to add that I think that McConaughey's performance in this movie is absolutely superb. Before we get to Job, I would like for us to consider the stories of 9 other people in the Bible who lost the will to live. These men either took their lives or asked God to allow them to die. Let's start with Moses. Moses was given responsibility for leading the Israelites out of Egypt through the wilderness up to the Promised Land. When Moses believed that this burden was unbearable, he asked God to kill him. But God had a better solution. He told Moses to appoint 70 elders to help him with his duties. In the midst of our trials, no matter how intelligent we are, we should not expect our reason to save us every time. Abimelech was one of the judges in Israel before they had a king. In a battle when Israel was attacking a walled city, a woman dropped a millstone from the top of the wall, and it fell on Abimelech's head. It did not kill him immediately, but he knew that he was dying. He asked his sword bearer to kill him so that he would not be known as the judge who was killed by a woman. Many people are like Abimelech, wanting to choose for themselves the way that they exit this world. A few proceed to reject God and take matters into their own hands. Samson, also one of Israel's judges, was blinded and imprisoned by the Philistines. It seemed that he would spend the rest of his days as their prisoner, only good for entertaining his captors by performing feats of strength. When given the opportunity, he pushed the support columns out from under the building he was in, and the building collapsed, killing a large group of Philistines. But it also collapsed on and killed Samson. He sacrificed his life to kill these leaders of Israel's enemy, or perhaps it was to get revenge on those who had blinded him and imprisoned him. He willingly sacrificed his life for what he considered to be a greater good. Saul, Israel's first king, was wounded in a battle with the Philistines. He feared that if the Philistines took him alive, they would abuse him. So he asked his sword-bearer to kill him so that he might avoid being abused by the Philistines. When his sword-bearer refused, Saul fell on his own sword. The Philistines decapitated his lifeless body and fastened it to a wall of the city. Apparently his fears were well-founded, but that did not justify committing suicide. Satan presents the suicide option to troubled minds. He wants them to see it as the only realistic solution to their problems. Ahithophel was an advisor to Absalom when Absalom was challenging his father, King David, for the rule of Israel. When Absalom was following his advice, everything was great. But then Ahithophel gave some advice to Absalom, and not only did Absalom reject it, he followed the advice of another advisor. Ahithophel's feelings were hurt, and he acted like a 5-year-old who thinks his brother got a bigger piece of cake than he did. So Ahithophel hanged himself. The human mind is weakened by emotions and cannot be trusted in every situation. Zimri became king of the northern kingdom of Israel by killing the existing king and seizing control. After only a few days, the other leaders of Israel sought to remove him. He did not want to be killed, so he went into his house and burned the house down around him. Have you ever made a bad decision, realized it almost immediately, but it was too late to change it? I suspect that Zimri felt that way in the last few minutes of his life as the flames engulfed him. Elijah was one of Israel's great prophets. After tremendous success on Mount Carmel, he ran from Jezebel's threats. All that great work that God did through him on Mount Carmel, and he ran to get away from Jezebel. He was depressed and no longer wanted to live, so he asked God to kill him. However, God did not honor that request. Instead, God showed Elijah that there was more for him to do. He gave him a to-do list and told him to get out and do those things. It's very hard to lose your will to live if your focus is on other people. Jonah hated the Ninevites and was angry with God for offering salvation to them. He asked God to kill him so that he would not have to witness it. But God had a lesson for Jonah to learn. God is a God of mercy, and he will show mercy to whomever he pleases. Judas hanged himself because of the guilt and shame he felt over his betrayal of Jesus. Sometimes those who want to take their own lives are burdened by guilt and shame, so they do not want to discuss those embarrassing issues with anyone. In every situation where someone was burdened by something and asked God to take his life, God did not honor that request. The time of a person's death is God's to determine, not his own. We come now to the story of Job. Job was a man of great character, one of the finest men in the whole East. He was a righteous man of great faith. He was a family man who was very protective of his children. He had great wealth with many thousands of sheep, camels, oxen, and donkeys, with many servants to tend to his livestock. But he was not immune from problems. Problems do not stay away just because you have wealth or just because you have great faith. Satan appeared before God, and God said, "Have you considered my servant Job? Satan said that Job was faithful only because God had built a hedge around him, protecting him. Satan said if the hedge were removed and if you just slapped him around a little bit, he would curse you to your face. God said, okay, just do not touch him. Do anything else that you want, just do not touch him. Satan may bring great trouble, but God is still in control and will always accomplish his purposes. Then in rapid succession, Job lost his oxen and donkeys, his sheep, his camels, his children. All Job's wealth and his children were taken away in a heartbeat. Such a loss is devastating. Imagine that your immediate family is taken away from you. In addition, all at once, everything that you have, all your wealth, including your savings, Social Security, and pension, everything that you have is taken away in an instant. How do you feel? What's going to be your reaction? Job's response was, naked I came into this world, and naked I go out. I came into the world with nothing, and I will leave with nothing. Job recognized that all that we have is owned by God and on loan to us. When we die, we keep none of it. Satan went back to God and said, let me hit him, then he will curse you. God granted his request, but with one restriction. He must not take Job's life. So Job's health was taken away. He was given horrendous sores all over his body. Have you ever had shingles? Or do you know anybody who has had shingles? While shingles is limited to small sections of the body, imagine having sores like shingles all over your body, head to toe, horrible itching all over your body with no pain medicine, pain 24 hours a day, itching sores all over your body after you've lost everything, your possessions, your family, and now your health. That would test anyone's will to live. Now, some good spousal support should help, but Job's wife looked at him and said, curse God and die. Get out of here. I do not want to look at you and your sores. Those closest to us play a significant role in determining our will to live. Then we have Job's friends coming to offer support. It all started well. They sat with him quietly and did not say anything for days. People tend to be talkers. They think that they must have answers to everything and must tell everybody what needs to be done. But we do not know very much. Sometimes it's just good to be with someone and be quiet. His friends soon got into trouble by talking, thinking that they had the answers to all Job's problems. They did not. The best action we can take is to comfort others with the comfort with which we've been comforted. When we have experienced something similar to what they are experiencing, and we have been comforted in that situation, we should comfort our neighbor with the same kind of comfort as that with which we have been comforted. All these things have come upon Job, and Job does not know why they have happened. Job cried out why, but God never told him why they happened. God said, you do not need to know that. You do not need to know why. But we also cry out, why, God? Why? You do not need to know why either. You need to trust and obey. In his despair, Job cursed the day of his birth. And cursing the day of your birth is not a smart move. It's a denial of God's wisdom and providence. God brought you into this world for a reason, and you must not be deterred from fulfilling your purpose. Job cried out, God, take my life. God, I cannot take it anymore. Take my life. Job said he wanted to die. God said that is not the answer. God proceeded to correct Job. Since we cannot know all that God knows, we must be content to trust and obey. Matthew Henry makes a very astute comment. When things are going very well in our lives, we must be willing to die. And when things are going very badly in our lives, we must be willing to live. Whether we live or we die is God's choice, and we must be content to trust and obey. Job stood fast through all his trials, and he did not curse God. He did want answers that he did not need to know. Yes, he made mistakes along the way, but God was faithful and forgiving. Job was restored. His possessions, his family, and his health were restored. No matter what our trials, no matter how big the problem, no matter how rough it may get, we will be restored. Maybe not in this lifetime, but we will be restored. The trials may go on for the rest of our lives, but we will be restored. A few days ago, my younger brother Ron called me about a dream he had had the night before. The dream was about our oldest brother Lloyd. Lloyd died in 1980. His arrival into the world was a difficult one, and perhaps his biggest challenge in his life was walking. As a young boy, Lloyd underwent many surgeries on his legs at Shriners Hospital for Crippled Children in St. Louis. Until he graduated from high school, he was able to walk more than a few steps, only if he had something or someone to hold on to. After high school and until his death in his 40s, his mobility declined, and he needed a cane and then a wheelchair. So what was Ron's dream? In his dream, Ron was driving down Highway 27 near Winter Haven, Florida, and he saw Lloyd in the median. Lloyd took his cane and with a strong heave threw it away and started walking normally down the road. Then Lloyd was in the vehicle driving, something he always wanted to do but never could because of his physical limitations. Lloyd then explained to Ron that he had not died. He was just getting repaired. Isn't that what we do when we go to be with the Lord? All our limitations are removed. We are repaired. We are restored to what we could have been. Trials are a test of our faith. We learn how strong our faith is when we see how we react to the problems of life. Do we still have the will to live? Do we still have hope? Do we still have confidence that God will keep all his promises? Losing hope is the issue. If we have hope, we have confidence that God is faithful in keeping his promises, especially his promise to repair and restore us. We have these trials for a little while, and then God will repair and restore us. Maybe not in this life, but we will be restored. We have this hope. We have the will to live because we have this hope, this confidence that God is going to be faithful to what he has promised. If we do not have hope, then our will to live is very weak and susceptible to dissipating entirely. We need hope. God also tells us that if we focus on him, he will give us the faith to endure. If we focus on God, then we have the strength to endure. If we focus on ourselves and not on him, that is when we are weak and get into trouble. That is when we lose hope. If I believe that only I can get it done, but I don't see a way to do it, then it's an impossible situation. Then I wonder, why am I even here? Without faith in our Creator and placing faith only in ourselves, the hope is gone, and the will to live can quickly disappear. With real faith and real hope, we know that we are living for God, and we can stay focused on him. With the hope that he has given us, we will have the will to live no matter what comes upon us in this life.
I love to tell the story, 'twill be my theme in glory, to tell the old story of Jesus and his love.